The price to hang on to the Bears' backup just got revealed, and more than a couple NFL teams are shaking in their boots. A tight end that pretty much everybody had written off just sent a message from the combine nobody saw coming. And the defense, Bears Nation, the defense is still the Achilles heel, but there is a college giant and an elite safety on Ryan Poles' radar. 3 stories that are about to shape this franchise's future. Don't go anywhere. The show is just getting started. News 1 Tyson Bagent cannot believe how fast everything is moving around this team, and what is about to be said right now about the Chicago Bears backup quarterback is exactly the kind of thing that can change the direction of a franchise. We are talking about Tyson Bagent, the backup who has quietly built a solid reputation inside this organization, and suddenly right in the middle of the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine, that name pops up in reports as one of the most interesting trade chips in the entire league, and there is a question that needs to be thrown out there because this needs to be thought through together. When general manager Ryan Poles and head coach Ben Johnson step up and publicly confirm that multiple teams have called asking about Bagent's availability, that is not a coincidence. That is a sign. And that sign says a lot about how this organization sees its own future. Let's lay out the full picture because this deserves to be understood clearly. Tyson Bagent is 25 years old, under contract through 2027 on a 2-year deal signed in 2025. Roughly $10 million with incentives, which makes this contract extremely affordable for any NFL team out there hunting for an answer at quarterback, and there are several of those teams right now. The New York Jets, the Arizona Cardinals, the Miami Dolphins, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons, all on high alert, all looking at Bagent as a real option, but here's what is really sticking in the mind tonight. Brad Biggs, the Chicago Tribune insider, who knows this team about as well as anyone in the football media game, just dropped the asking price. Chicago would want to move Bagent, and that price is a second-round pick or 2 picks that add up to second-round value on the trade chart. That, Bears Nation, is not chump change. That is what Chicago thinks of this player. They are not dumping this contract. They are not giving this backup away. They are valuing this as a legit top-tier asset. Here's the thing. The reason that price is so high makes perfect sense if it is understood where this team is headed. The Bears just won their first playoff game since 2011. For the first time in a long time, this organization smells like a real contender in the NFC. And to be a real contender, every spot on that roster has to be solid, including the backup quarterback. Because if something happens to Caleb Williams, who is going to be the one holding all that momentum together, Bagent, and the Bears know it. And here is something else to chew on. Why does Ben Johnson talk about Bagent with that much respect? Why does Poles not even flinch when confirming there are calls about the backup? Because this is not the kind of player that gets tossed on the market on clearance. The sense here is that the front office is sending a crystal clear message to the league. If anyone wants Bagent, the going rate is set and it is full market value. Now, the question that keeps the lights on at night is whether any team is actually going to cough up that second rounder. Biggs admitted that it is not a lock that a team will put that pick on the table. And that matters because it means the most likely scenario right now is that Bagent stays in Chicago, stays as Caleb Williams' backup, stays as this team's insurance policy while they build something big in this city. But here's where the whole equation flips. Biggs added a nugget that completely changes the analysis. The Bears have already sat down with agents who represent quarterbacks with that low-end starter, high-end backup profile, which means they are building contingency plans. They are basically saying, if someone meets our price on Bagent, we are ready to pivot. That is not a front office winging it. That is a front office running off a roadmap. Stat-wise, Bagent has appeared in 12 regular season games with 4 starts, all back in the 2023 season, completed 66.4% of passes for 917 yards, 3 touchdowns and 6 picks with a passer rating right around 73.0, added 109 rushing yards and 2 scores on the ground. Those numbers are not blowing anybody out of their seat, but they are the numbers of a player who can compete, who can keep a team afloat, and who can do some damage in the right system. Now stack that up against what is going on around the NFC North. The Packers have Jordan Love locked in as their franchise quarterback. The Vikings have Sam Darnold under contract and are moving pieces around that. The Lions have Jared Goff locked down long-term, while the rivals have that spot clearly settled. The Bears have Caleb Williams as the main engine and Bagent as the first line of backup if something goes sideways. That setup works as long as the backup actually stays. There's a strong belief here with full conviction that Bagent is not leaving Chicago unless somebody shows up with a fat envelope. The Bears are not desperate to clear that contract. The cap situation at quarterback is fine, and if nobody pays the asking price, Tyson Bagent will be standing on that Soldier Field sideline on opening day of the 2026 season, backing up one of the most promising quarterbacks in the entire NFL. But if that caught anyone off guard, just wait to hear what just happened with another key piece of this offensive player a lot of people had already written off, whose future in Chicago just took a completely unexpected turn. Kmet. When Bears Nation started buzzing on social media that the number 2 tight end on this roster might be on the way out, the concern made sense. Colston Loveland's breakout as the starting tight end was so quick and so convincing that plenty of fans just assumed Cole Kmet, the Notre Dame product who has been rocking the navy and orange since 2020, was living out the final days in Chicago, and the financial logic seemed to back that up. Kmet is on the books for $11.6 million in both the 2026 and 2027 seasons. According to SpotTrack, for a player whose numbers have dipped steadily over the last 3 years, those cap hits were looking pretty tough to justify. But here is the thing. What insider Brad Biggs just laid out from the Combine flips that whole story on its head, and it changes how Kmet should be viewed inside this team. Biggs dropped a line that really hit hard when it came across the wire. The Bears are not evaluating Kmet through the lens of fantasy football stats, and that, Bears Nation, is a deep philosophical statement about how this organization understands football. Not everything is catches and yards. Not everything is touchdowns. There are layers to this game that do not show up on a basic stat sheet. And one of those layers is exactly where Cole Kmet shines. Let's run the numbers because they still matter. In 2023, Kmet caught 73 passes for 719 yards and 6 touchdowns. In 2024, production dropped to 47 grabs, 474 yards, and 4 scores. In 2025, this past season, the slide continued with 30 catches, 347 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Those are the lowest numbers since that rookie year in 2020. If all anyone did was look at those stats, it would be easy to say it is time to move on. Hard to argue with that at first glance, but here is what the traditional box score does not tell the full truth about. According to Pro Football Focus, Kmet posted a 62.2 run blocking grade in the 2025 season. And that grade is backed up by real impact on the field. Kmet was consistently moving pieces in the run game, opening lanes others do not even notice, doing the dirty work that allows the run game to hum at a high level. And here's the part a lot of people were missing. That blocking work from Kmet directly helped create the space where Colston Loveland was able to break out and shine as a receiver. That is exactly what the Bears are seeing when they look at Cole Kmet. They are not looking at a tight end in free fall. They see a pro who understands the role, executes it at a high level, and makes the player next to that spot better. In modern football, that kind of player has massive value, a value that never shows up in the fantasy box score, but that top-tier coaches and GMs absolutely recognize. So here's a question worth asking. In an offense that loves to run the football with Ben Johnson as one of the most creative offensive minds in today's game, does it really make sense to downplay a 6'6" tight end who can block with intelligence and power and still be a high-level emergency target in the passing game? That value is pretty much undeniable. Biggs pushed it even further, said that instead of shopping Kmet, Chicago is leaning toward a contract extension that would lower the cap hit and keep the tight end on the roster. That is exactly what a smart team does when it knows what it has. That is not a sign of financial weakness. That is a sign of organizational awareness. Now, the tricky part is real. Kmet is 26 years old, right in the prime of the career. A player at that stage, with that history in this league, is not going to take any pay cut with a big smile just because the front office asks nicely. There is going to be a negotiation, and that process is going to require both sides to give a little. Chicago's going to want to get that 11.6 million number down. Kmet is going to want something that still makes sense for that status and that age. The entire question is whether those two sides can meet somewhere in the middle. Look around the division and check how rivals handle similar situations. The Packers are known for keeping role players when they see system value, even when the counting stats do not pop. The Lions did something similar in recent years with guys who did not light up the stat sheet but kept Dan Campbell's system running clean. The Bears under Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson look like they are embracing that same kind of roster-building philosophy. Here's the bottom line, as clearly as it can be put, if the Bears manage to restructure Kmet's deal in a smart way, they will be keeping a high-quality asset at a reasonable price, maintaining continuity in a tight end room that already works, and giving Ben Johnson another legit tool in that offensive toolbox. That is just good football. That is smart team building. The most logical path right now is straightforward. Chicago does not move on from Cole Kmet. Chicago negotiates. Chicago finds a way to keep the offensive continuity that has been built while managing the cap with the same smart approach this organization has shown over the last 2 years. And the moment that extension goes public, Bears Nation is going to see why the Bears always had Kmet penciled in as part of the long-term plan. And just when it looked like the roster shaken news might be over, here comes what could be the single most strategic decision of the entire offseason, a decision tied to this team's weakest side of the ball, and two names that could completely change Chicago's defensive picture. News 3, Caleb Banks. Time to talk about the reality nobody in Bears Nation wants to sugarcoat and everybody has to face head on. The Chicago Bears defense finished the 2025 season ranked 29th in the NFL. 29th in a 32-team league in a city with the richest defensive tradition in football history, the city that birthed the monsters of the Midway, the city of Urlacher, Peppers, Hicks. Finishing 29th stings deep, and the question that has to be asked, the question every Bears fan is probably wrestling with tonight, is this: what is Ryan Poles going to do to fix it? Because having a contender-level offense is one thing, but to win a Super Bowl, both sides of the ball have to show up, and this Bears defense needs major surgery. Start with what is already known about the needs. Grady Jarrett was a massive disappointment in the first year in Chicago. That is not just one opinion, that is basically consensus across the analysis world. On top of that, Gervon Dexter might be on the way out in a trade, which would open a huge hole in the interior of the defensive line. Chicago needs muscle, disruption, someone who can blow up plays from the interior, and that is where Caleb Banks, the interior defensive lineman from the Florida Gators, comes flying into the picture. And this name is going to be on the lips of every Bears fan between now and draft day in April. Anthony Miller from Bear Goggles On, in a 3-round mock draft, projected the Bears to take Caleb Banks with the 25th pick in the first round. And once those physical numbers are seen, it is instantly clear why that name is gaining so much steam. 6'6", around 330 pounds, looks like a human being built in a lab to wreck offensive lines on Sundays. At the 2026 Combine, Banks shut it down early in drills because of some cleats that were bothering the feet, which some analysts circled as a small red flag. But before calling it, Banks posted the second longest broad jump among the defensive linemen at 9 feet 5 inches, which screams elite explosiveness for someone that big. No need to dance around it. Banks is one of the clearest boom or bust prospects in this entire draft. The upside is absolutely massive, but there are legit concerns. Spent the first 2 college seasons at Louisville, then transferred to Florida in 2023. The production sample size is on the smaller side, with most of it coming in the 2024 season when there were 21 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 4.5 sacks. The biggest concern is that a foot injury wrecked almost the entire final college season, which means the prospect is coming into the draft with medical questions still hanging. So here's the straight-up question: is it worth betting a first-round pick, number 25 overall, on a prospect carrying that kind of medical risk? The answer probably depends on what the Bears' own medical team sees in the private exam, what the doctors say about that foot, and whether Dennis Allen, the new defensive coordinator in Chicago, believes there is a real path to developing that raw talent into something special. Miller spelled it out in the write-up. Banks could walk in as a day-one starter and grow into a star under Allen's coaching over the next few years. And if that happens, if that boom side hits, the Bears would have landed exactly the kind of interior defensive game changer this unit needs. Someone who alters the math, brings inside pressure, and lets the edge rushers hunt with more freedom. But no conversation about rebuilding this Bears defense is complete without hitting the secondary, especially the safety position, which turned into another major offseason question mark. Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard III are free agents. That means Chicago could lose two safeties in the same offseason, creating a gigantic hole on the back end. Enter Cam Curl, the safety from the Los Angeles Rams, who Aaron Schatz from ESPN projected straight to the Bears as a free agent signing. Schatz laid out the logic. Curl can play deep or in the box, depending on what Chicago needs and which veterans return. That versatility is exactly what makes Curl attractive to a team still figuring out the exact identity of the defense under Dennis Allen. But the economics here have to be kept real because the numbers speak loudly. Curl is projected around $10 million per season on the open market per spot rack. And when that number is stacked up against what Jaquan Brisker is likely to ask for, the market value is pretty comparable. And that leads to the biggest question: if the Bears are going to drop $10 million per year on a safety, why not just keep Brisker, who already knows the system, already has relationships in that locker room, and has already shown what can be done in this defense? Brisker has the familiarity edge, and for a team trying to build continuity, that has real value that does not show up on a line item. The angle that really stands out is the cap space strategy. The Bears have needs all over. The offensive line needs work. The defensive line needs urgent help. And if $10 million a year is tied up in a safety when there are more affordable options on the board, options like Nick Cross, Kyle Duggar, Nick Scott, Xavier Woods, Alohi Gilman, or Ifeatu Melifonwu, all projected under $6 million a year, then the financial capital might be getting used in a way that makes it harder to handle more urgent needs. Check what the rivals in the NFC North are doing. The Packers are masters at finding mid-tier safeties who play above their price tag in that system. The Lions, under Dan Campbell, have consistently prioritized investing in the trenches over the secondary when in aggressive roster-building mode. The Vikings, with their new coach, have their own blueprint, but nobody in this division is throwing big money at safeties while more critical holes sit empty. Here's the stance backed by how this roster looks. The right path for the Bears at safety is not chasing the biggest, priciest name out there. The smart move is bringing Byard back at a reasonable number or signing one of those mid-tier safeties so there is enough money left to aggressively reinforce the defensive line, which is where the real bleeding is happening. And if the Bears can pair a smart value safety with a draft pick like Caleb Banks in that interior front, Ryan Poles would be piecing together a puzzle that could shift this defense from 29th in the league back towards something that actually honors the monsters of the Midway tradition. This city has waited far too long to see real winning football at Soldier Field again. Caleb Williams is running the show on offense. The offensive roster is taking shape. Now it is the defense's turn. And the choices Poles makes in the next few weeks will say a lot about whether this organization is truly ready for the next level. Bears Nation need everybody in the comments because there are 3 conversations that have to happen right now off everything that just got laid out in this video. First, Tyson Bagent. The organization slapped a clear price tag on the market, and that price is a second-round pick. Straight to the point, does anybody really think a team is going to hand over that pick for Bagent? Or does the backup stay in Chicago to support Caleb Williams? Drop that take in the comments. That is a conversation worth having. Second, Cole Kmet, the closest insider to this team, says the Bears want to keep that tight end and might restructure the deal. Question for everybody: how much should Kmet be willing to take in a restructure? And can this front office actually land on a number that works for both sides? Let it be known down there. And third, the one that really burns, the defense. Caleb Banks at number 25 in the draft. Cam Curl versus Jaquan Brisker at safety. 2 huge decisions that are going to define whether this team has the right balance to make a deep playoff run next season. With the salary cap limits the Bears are dealing with, what should be Ryan Poles' #1 priority this offseason? Here's what has been put on the table tonight. Analysis, context, numbers, comparisons. All of that is laid out because there is real belief in this community. There is belief in Bears Nation. There is belief that the fans of this team deserve real information, honest perspectives, and a space to talk football with passion and depth. This channel is home. It is home for every single person who loves the Bears with that unique intensity only Chicago fans understand. If this is the first time stopping by, go hit that subscribe button right now because Bears News is not slowing down over the next few weeks, and there is a guarantee that this channel will be here for every move, every decision, every rumor, and every confirmation. With the level of detail and passion this team deserves, and if already part of this family, thank you. Truly, thanks for sticking around to the end. Thanks for being part of this. Hit that like button on this video so more Bears fans can find this channel and jump into the conversation. Bear down, Chicago. The city needs this. The team is building something big, and this community is going to be right here to see it and break it down every step of the way. See you in the next video. Duh, Bears.